Why are you sitting in the dark?
I've been reading the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on Russian interference in the 2016 election.
I thought you'd already read that.
I read last year's Mueller report. This came out in August. It goes beyond Mueller.
Anything new in it?
Yes. They knew.
Who? Knew what?
The Republicans on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Mueller was limited to looking for criminal activity. The committee was not, and they found evidence that the Trump campaign knowingly collaborated with Russian intelligence.
You already knew that.
A lot of people suspected it, but there wasn't any evidence.
You need evidence, you dumb bitch. They did it. They were glad they did it. They'd do it again.
I didn't want to believe they were this bad.
I told you they were this bad. Why didn't you listen to me, Oracle dumbass?
Because I don't want to believe the worst of people.
Well, I feel good. I was smarter than you for a change.
So you were.
In fact, while you were wasting your time reading something I'd already told you, I did some reading on my own.
Oh?
Yeah, I've been researching QAnon.
QAnon is a new conspiracy theory that explains...
Just a moment. QAnon's not new, it's not a conspiracy theory, and it doesn't explain anything.
Bitch. I'm gonna go get a beer.
QAnon. QAnon is a type of moral panic in which people fear that some evil threatens society and that the defense of society calls for action. QAnon is spread not to inform of a real danger, but in order to justify violence against its adherents' political opponents. The earliest version of QAnon dates back to
2016. I did my research. QAnon has its roots in Pizzagate.
Some of it, yes, but I think a case can be made for a much earlier year than 2016.
Okay. What year?
In 1144, the murder of an English boy, known to history as William of Norwich, triggered an increase in tensions between the Anglo-Saxon people of Norwich and the small Jewish community that dwelt there under the protection of the Norman aristocracy. Nearly 30 years later, a monk named Thomas of Monmouth wrote a book depicting the 12-year-old William as a divine saint martyred by the Jews of Norwich. He claims that William was lured to the Jewish quarter, treated as a guest overnight, and on the next day, Passover, his hosts tortured and crucified him, yet were not able to satisfy their heartless cruelty and their inborn hatred of the Christian name. So, in imitation of the crucified Christ, young Saint William died. Thomas of Monmouth obtained his stirring description of William's death from a Jew who had converted to Catholicism. This Jew, Theobald of Cambridge, stated that it was written that the Jews, without the shedding of human blood, could neither obtain their freedom nor could they ever return to their fatherland. Hence it was laid down by them in ancient times that every year they must sacrifice a Christian in some part of the world to the Most High God in scorn and contempt of Christ, that so they might avenge their sufferings on him, inasmuch as it was because of Christ's death that they had been shut out from their own country, and were in exile as slaves in a foreign land. Wherefore the chief men and rabbis of the Jews who dwell in Spain assemble together at Narbonne, and they cast lots for all the countries which the Jews inhabit, and the place whose lot is drawn has to fulfill the duty imposed by authority. Now in that year in which we know that William was slain, it happened that the lot fell upon the Norwich Jews, and all the synagogues in England signified, by letter or by message, their consent that the wickedness should be carried out at Norwich. Following the distribution of Thomas of Monmouth's account, a number of other unsolved child murders in the area were attributed to the Jewish community. Word spread across the countryside, and year by year anti-Semitic feeling increased. In 1190, a popular uprising which the Norman aristocracy was unable to suppress resulted in the extirpation of Norwich's Jewish community, and 100 years later, all Jews were expelled from the whole of England.
Are you telling me that QAnon is responsible for the expulsion of Jews from England?
No, but I have another example of some interesting behavior in England that relates to QAnon.
And you're going to tell me no matter what?
No. If you'd prefer not to hear it, we can talk about something else.
But you want to tell me, right?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Medieval and early modern witch hunts.
Witch hunts are related to QAnon.
I call them like I see them. Witch hunts often involved charges of ritual infanticide against the accused. In the early 15th century, a Franciscan scholar by the name of Bernardino of Siena claimed that a woman confessed to him that she had killed some 30 children by bleeding them. In England, in the year 1612, a series of witch trials took place in Lancashire. A teenage girl named Grace Sowerbucks... What is it?
Sowerbucks.
Quiet, you. In England, in the year 1612, a series of witch trials took place in Lancashire. 3 women were accused by a teenage girl of stealing the baby of one Thomas Walshman in order to suck its blood. The child sickened, died, and was buried. Allegedly, the 3 women opened the grave and stole the body, then cooked and ate it. Now, this particular case seems to have been complicated by anti-Catholic sentiment. One of the women was the widow of a man who had converted to the Church of England and been disinherited by his father, a local Catholic aristocrat who had often been the target of government harassment for his refusal to convert. When cross-examined, the teenage witness against the 3 women recanted her testimony, saying that she had been coached by a Jesuit priest hiding in the area. The story of ritual infanticide had been fabricated in order to bring state violence against an individual simply because a local aristocrat hated her. To quote the clerk who took record of the trials, "Thus were these poor innocent creatures, by the great care and pains of this honorable judge, delivered from the danger of this conspiracy, this bloody practice of the priest laid open." That was just one of a series of witch trials in a 2-day period. Another 17 people were accused of witchcraft. 11 of those were put to death.
But QAnon is not a witch hunt.
Before we can say what QAnon is or is not...
You're not going to let me talk about QAnon, are you?
If you want to talk about it, you may, but I thought I should mention another related matter.
What?
Abortion. In the early 1980s, politically active evangelical Protestant leaders in the United States began arguing something new, that abortion was murder.
Wait, religious leaders have always argued that abortion is murder.
No, they haven't, and I've got the receipts.
You are shitting me.
I am not. I could talk at length about the history of the anti-abortion movement, but now is not the time.
No, I want to hear this. You can't say something like that and move on like it's no big deal.
Then we'll talk about it some other day. The point I'm trying to make now is that one can see similarities between anti-abortion politics and QAnon.
What similarities?
When one says that abortion is murder, one is asserting that abortion is simply another kind of infanticide. From this viewpoint, people who support abortion rights are therefore advocates of infanticide. And this is not some shadowy cabal of witches in medieval Europe stealing infants for their dark rights. These advocates are the leaders of one of America's 2 major political parties. In 1980, American evangelicals regarded abortion as a difficult personal and moral choice. By 1990, they regarded it as murder. Since that time, there have been numerous terrorist attacks on reproductive health clinics. In 1993, Dr. David Gunn became the first OB/GYN murdered by an anti-abortion activist. Central Illinois Right to Life defended Gunn's murder as the product of frustration with an increasingly tyrannical society that is devoid of truth and lacking in moral leadership. In the years since the Gunn murder, prominent Democrats have been accused of supporting baby killing any time they speak in favor of improved reproductive health care for women.
Sorry, I don't see the connection between QAnon and abortion.
Then perhaps we should explore the connection between QAnon and D&D.
Now I know you're shitting me.
In the game Dungeons & Dragons, people leave behind the troubles of their drab contemporary lives and enter into an exciting fantasy world where they are the protagonists in a heroic struggle. Because the game allows players to create characters who cast spells and fight, or sometimes summon, demons, once the game became well known in the early 1980s, some individuals in the evangelical community perceived a satanic influence and campaigned against it. At the time, the media was saturated with stories of satanic ritual abuse. Members of a family who ran a preschool in California were put on trial for the sexual abuse of children, abuse that allegedly took place in secret tunnels beneath the daycare facility. A reporter named Geraldo Rivera claimed that there were over 1 million Satanists in the United States, linked in a highly organized secret network.
That is ridiculous.
Is it any more ridiculous than QAnon?
If we ever get around to talking about QAnon, I could tell you.
Well, that time has come. QAnon, as introduced earlier, is a type of moral panic, in which people fear that some evil...
I did the research, I get to talk about it.
Oh!
QAnon is a new conspiracy theory that explains Donald Trump's erratic and assholish actions as an ongoing effort to defeat sinister elements within the American government. This deep state, as a conspiracy is called, is controlled by a secret and international satanic network engaged in child sex trafficking and murder. Prominent Democrats are supposed to be members, as are a number of wealthy Jews like J.S.Sollace. Members of this conspiracy often kill the children they abuse and take their blood. What the hell? This is everything you were just talking about.
I know.
Even the secret tunnels under the pizzeria is recycled.
I know. I told you there is nothing new about QAnon. In fact, Gregory Stanton, remember him?
The genocide guy?
Yes. Dr. Stanton has described QAnon as a rebranded Nazi cult.
Shit.
May I have my chair back?
Unbelievable.
What is?
That this conspiracy theory keeps coming back again and again. It's like QAnon just stole parts of conspiracies and threw them all together.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what happened.
I was going to call it a cult, but after you told me this, I don't know what it is.
Well, it is like a cult. People embrace these insane concepts, and when they try to tell friends and family, they sound insane. When friends and family talk back against the delusion, most QAnon believers will retreat from them and cling to their beliefs more tightly.
And facts don't help?
No. As it happens, appealing to fact is one of the least persuasive things one can do. If you ever want to change someone's mind about something, do not rely solely on facts.
Why don't facts work?
Because of a little something called knowledge resistance. Knowledge resistance is a behavior in which people avoid, block, and even consciously reject arguments and evidence that threaten their beliefs. When one's social identity is tied to one's beliefs, those beliefs must be defended. In a social context, stating a belief is done not to share knowledge, but to express loyalty to the beliefs of one's social groups. Within a community, there is a kind of certified knowledge. These are accepted beliefs that knit a community together. Loyalty to those beliefs increases the chances of community collaboration in efforts to solve problems faced by members of the community and the community at large. Michael Klintman, professor of sociology at Lund University, posits that throughout history, individuals with an unusually high ability to find reasons that support their own knowledge beliefs had higher chances of enjoying a high-status position in their group. In organized religion, this tends to manifest in a well-educated priestly class, who are able to pass on their analyses of Holy Writ to the believers in their care. But it is not only religion that does this. Virtually any human social group, political parties, scientific disciplines, hobbyists, fandoms, filmmakers, behaves in the same manner. They will come to a consensus about a certain type of knowledge, and those who come up with the best reasons for supporting that knowledge are likely to gain status in that community. In practice, this means that people are loyal to knowledge even if it is flawed. We have a bias to accept arguments from recognized authorities and reject arguments from outsiders, rejecting information based not only on its content, but on who provides it. That's an ad hominem fallacy, attacking the messenger instead of the message.
I do that all the time. I won't waste my time with anything coming from Fox News, for example.
That's not really an ad hominem fallacy.
Then what is it?
There's no fancy Latin phrase for it. You just don't see any reason to give known liars the benefit of the doubt.
Because I'm smart.
This tendency we have to reject even good information from outside sources hinders our ability to gather knowledge, but it provides a social benefit. Accepting new knowledge that goes against the group carries a social cost. When the social cost outweighs the value of the new information is likely to be rejected. New information can be false, but if it reinforces a community's certified knowledge, it tends to be accepted quickly. That is, claims which fit an existing narrative are easier to accept. Contradictory claims must somehow offer a better narrative. Religious explanations are narrative, which makes them easier to convey. Scientific explanations are systemic, and harder to convey. Popular understanding of science often has to be advanced through narratives. For example, evolution is often described as a process that seeks to produce fitter organisms, or one hears that organisms can be classified as more or less evolved. In reality, evolution has no goals, and any living creature is as equally evolved as any other living creature.
You say that, but I guarantee you there are more than a few knuckle-draggers in QAnon.
Ah, dehumanization, the fourth stage of genocide.
Let's not go there again.
No, I want to stick with evolution for a little while.
Oh, good.
Human brains evolved to solve certain types of problems, such as, how do I get dinner? Answer, pointy end of a stick goes in an animal, and food grows on some plants. That's something you can convey to members of your community, and it's immediately believable. Whereas evolution is not immediately believable without understanding underlying systems and how they account for certain facts.
In other words, our brains didn't evolve so that we could understand evolution.
Correct. Outside of scientific circles, evolution took a while to catch on. It caught on with non-scientific elites when they realized they could take its description of the natural order and misrepresent it as endorsing a social order. The rich could take from the poor, the strong from the weak, and they claimed it was a good thing because it's how humanity improves.
But that's not how humanity improves.
No, it's not. But this idea of social Darwinism was promoted in order to justify taking resources from outgroups. It was used to imply a moral obligation to conquer the people of other lands.
Because they were less evolved.
Right, and because we have a natural tendency to view our own community or subculture as superior, once one brings moral obligations into the picture, the in-group is perceived as morally superior to outgroups.
Okay, I think I can see why people might resist inconvenient facts, but there are no facts in QAnon. I mean, I don't understand how people can continue to believe it or how they start believing it in the first place. I mean, it's just so utterly insane.
Complex beliefs take a certain amount of work in order for one to accept them. It does not matter if the belief in question is true or not. Evolution has its roots in the natural world and can be studied and understood by anyone willing to make the effort. QAnon is fiction, but fiction can also be studied and understood. When people put effort into believing something, they develop knowledge loyalty. A community of such people will develop a more profound loyalty to each other if the knowledge they have obtained is particularly difficult or outrageous. They enjoy a communal warmth from believing together something different from what most people do. One is united with others in an exclusive community. But in order to accept a new belief, one must be open to it.
You mean they got into QAnon because they wanted to believe it?
Precisely.
Why would anyone want to believe the world is run by a cabal of blood-drinking pedophiles?
So that you can fight them.
What?
Why play Dungeons and Dragons? To leave behind our drab contemporary lives and be heroes. Suppose your life is crappy and keeps getting crappier. Just getting into the workforce has saddled you with debt, your boss treats you like a peasant, and every time you have a chance of getting your head above water, the big banks crash the economy. Whose fault is that?
It's kind of the system's fault.
Right. Late-stage capitalism is at fault, but that's a systemic explanation, demanding the kind of problem-solving for which our brains aren't really evolved. A narrative explanation can say, these particular people are at fault. Here's someone whom you can blame.
Like Jews in England, or witches.
Or immigrants. By fitting a narrative, it taps into a way of perceiving the world that's basic to humanity. People engage in slow thinking and in fast thinking. Slow thinking is the analytical part of our brain. Fast thinking is the intuitive and social part. Slow analytical thinking uses more energy. In a crisis, in times of stress, our slow analytical thinking tends to shut down. That's why we don't make good decisions when we're panicked.
Late-stage capitalism makes people panic, and they start blaming immigrants.
Or they can be convinced to blame them. If one can induce a sense of crisis in people, they become easy targets for narratives that blame one or more outgroups for their problems. Who would you say is the primary target for accepting the QAnon narrative?
People who want to say the N-word in public.
Wouldn't you say conservatives are the target audience?
I think I just did.
Harsh.
Look, you do this a lot. I asked you a simple question, and you took it in some weird direction.
Did I?
You just did. You said QAnon was like D&D, and then suddenly we're talking about late-stage capitalism. How is QAnon like D&D?
Well, to be more specific, QAnon is an alternate reality game with a deadly purpose.
Deadly?
You find QAnon ridiculous, impossible to believe.
Yeah, it is.
You are correct. It is literally unbelievable. But so is believing that Donald Trump is the defender of Western civilization. It is patently, obviously false. People believe in QAnon and in Trump because they want to believe.
Again, why would anyone want to believe the world is run by these monsters?
Because they want to fight the monsters. Hand me that book.
This one?
Yes. Whenever I find someone wanting to believe the worst of people, this quote comes to mind. Suppose one reads a story of filthy atrocities in the paper. Then suppose that something turns up suggesting that the story might not be quite true, or not quite so bad as it was made out. Is one's first feeling, thank God, even they aren't quite so bad as that? Or is it a feeling of disappointment, and even a determination to cling to the first story for the sheer pleasure of thinking your enemies are as bad as possible? If it is the second, then it is, I am afraid, the first step in a process which, if followed to the end, will make us into devils. You see, one is beginning to wish that black was a little blacker. If we give that wish its head, later on we shall wish to see gray as black, and then to see white itself as black. Finally, we shall insist on seeing everything, God and our friends and ourselves included, as bad, and not be able to stop doing it. We shall be fixed forever in a universe of pure hatred. This is why I didn't want to believe the worst of the Republicans on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I didn't want to think they would cover for a president they knew was corrupt. I thought, if I were one of them, my conscience couldn't handle it.
They don't have consciences. They're inhuman.
I know they don't have consciences, but I don't want ever to perceive another human being as a monster.
Even Trump?
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his is the least human. But most people are just people, a mix of good and bad like everyone else. Dehumanizing people is usually a sign that one intends to harm them, and QAnon is the latest version of a very old lie intended to justify violence.
Well, it certainly opens the door to violence.
No, violence is the intent. Why do you think these conspiracies are always about children? Because fearing that one's child may come to harm is a near universal experience. If you want to paint a person or a group as the ultimate evil and organize people against them, claim they engage in pedophilia or infanticide.
So whoever made up QAnon wants to paint Trump's opponents not as wrong, but actively evil.
And more. The Christians of Norwich didn't kill their Jewish neighbors because the Jews were murdering children. They claimed Jews were murdering children because they wanted to kill Jews.
Yeah, but I don't think the QAnon people want to kill Jews.
No, they have someone else in mind.
Who?
Who does QAnon say is behind this monstrous conspiracy?
J.S.Sollace, Clinton, Obama, senior Democrats, liberals, leftists, celebrities who say bad things about Trump, anyone who says bad things about Trump.
There you go.
Yeah, but they can't target everyone. Most people say bad things about Trump.
And if you pretend those people are satanic baby killers, you can unleash violence against them.
You can't kill every Democrat and celebrity who calls out Trump on his shit.
No, but imprisoning or even killing the most prominent ones? You could do that. What's the most popular chant at Trump's rallies? Lock her up. And what did Trump say to the Proud Boys in his debate with Biden? Stand by.
Well, you've gone and done it again. I'm thoroughly depressed. Some oracle of soulless you turned out to be.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to share some of what I read.
And I wanted to show you that I do actually read from time to time. I can learn on my own, you know.
I know.
I'm going to need another drink. By the way, you're out of sherry again. See if you can get something stronger, too. We're going to need it to get through another 2 months of Trump's whining.
I fear you are right.
Oracle, you are so close.